Hey, everybody. Welcome back to a new episode of Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. Today, we welcome to the show Arun Swaminathan. Arun is the CEO at Coya Therapeutics, where they are developing multimodality therapies for neurodegenerative, autoimmune, and metabolic diseases, specifically ALS and Alzheimer's. If the company name Coya sounds familiar to those of you who are regular to the show, you'll remember that we interviewed Howard Berman, the founding CEO of Coya, about a year and a half ago. And Howard brought a passion and a deep commitment to the work at Coya because of his personal story. And in this conversation with Arun, as the now CEO at Coya, he is carrying that baton and the DNA of passion that Howard founded the company on. Who Arun is to me is stewardship. That word is never said in our conversation, but Arun embodies deep stewardship for this passion that he inherited and took over from Howard. He feels a sense of stewardship, embodies that in the industry, and then also stewardship of the culture and of the dreams that they have and plans that they have at Coya. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Arun Swaminathan. Arun, welcome to the show. So excited to have you.
Thank you, Jeff. Pleasure being on the show.
So with that, I would love for you to start us and tell us what you're up to in the world.
Yeah, no, Jeff, what am I up to in the world? Right now, my world is really consumed by Coya and making sure that we meet the vision and mission of Coya and transform, hopefully, the lives of patients. That's our dream. So a lot of my world today revolves around Coya, revolves around family, and revolves around staying healthy. So, I make sure in between all this, I get my 10,000 steps a day. But that's where my world revolves now. But I got to this revolution through a lot of different things, right? Through the passion I have developed over years in this industry to make a difference in patients' lives. And my passion to convert good science to actual things, actual products that are meaningful and get to the patients, because good science without it helping someone is kind of meaningless on its own. So that's what my world revolves around. My world revolves around what can I do better? How can I, both as an individual and in my role as a leader of a company, how can I make that happen? That's, mostly what my world revolves around. So.
You've been in this business a long time, and we all, in our professional walk, I think about my first job, I was just excited to get a paycheck. And so I'm wondering, in your journey, can you remember the moment or series of moments that flipped the switch from this is a means for me to provide for myself and my family, to do something fun, to now what you just described, a passion to turning science into impact for the patient? Was there something that happened that flipped that switch for you?
It always feels like a switch was flipped. And I always remind people, the switch doesn't get flipped. It kind of has been building. And then what people see is the light turn on or off. But there's a lot that goes behind before that happens. I think a pivotal moment for me was when I decided to co-found a company. That was about 10 years ago. That was a confluence of things. I started as a scientist, did my PhD in transplant immunology, had the pleasure and privilege, of being with people like Dr. Thomas Starzl, Dr. Venkat, legends, titans in that field of transplantation. Saw their passion, saw their dedication, working through into when they were 80 years old, 75 years old. And I said, look, I want to make a meaningful difference. Paychecks are obviously important and will always be important. And I think it took me 15 years or so to develop the skill sets. And I have to thank companies like BMS profoundly for it because of the foundation I got in those places to give me the courage, the confidence, but also being able to say, what is it I want to do that starts making that impact? And to me, that culminated in co-founding a company about 10 years ago with the mission that, let me take all the things I've learned. And as I said in my earlier, about a couple of minutes ago, how do I take good science and convert it into meaningful therapies for patients? So I think that 10 years ago was maybe that switch that you're talking about.
So the public evidence of the light being on. But what I heard you say is, as a scientist, trained scientist, that the seeds of that desire have really always been there. I think that's what I heard you say.
Absolutely. I'm a naturally curious person, and I say this to people I've hired. The number one trait I look for in someone that I hire is not their skill set on whether they're capable of doing the job they're being hired for, is are they naturally curious? Are they willing to take the time to understand how things work? What can I do differently? Are they asking those questions? And I'm a naturally curious person. So that to me has been my primary driver. And I think that's my internal switch that says, you got to do something different. You got to try something. Got to go. Don't be satisfied.
Yeah. Where does that curiosity get satisfied as a CEO? It may be, we may say, well, as a bench scientist, as a student scientist, and through the ranks, there's a natural field or sandbox where curiosity is cultivated and satisfied. But as a CEO, where does that itch get scratched today?
That's a great question, Jeff. I think curiosity is never completely scratched, as I guess I would say, because the minute you scratch it, there's a new curiosity that pops up, and that's what keeps me driving. So as a CEO, it's really about being curious about how can we get there faster? Can we do something more effectively? Can we do it better? Are there other applications of our technology that we haven't thought about, that we should be thinking about? Are there other patient groups that could benefit from this? Other people we should be collaborating with that we're not currently doing that may help us get there better? So, and then curiosity about the path to get there. How does one, not just the science, but how does one make sure the company is funded and stays towards the goal? How does the market look like? How do we stay curious about how the public markets work, right? I mean, everything, because all of that comes together in the success of the company. And if the company is successful, that means the patients are getting something at the end, because we're not going to be successful if ultimately we don't deliver for the patients. So I think it just shifts. There is no organized experiment to answer my curiosity, like in a lab where I would have said, okay, I want to test this hypothesis and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z experiments. But some of that applies with being a CEO as well. You say, here's a hypothesis I have. I think if we do this, we are going to be more productive. We're going to be more constructive. So let's see. Let's try X. Let's try Y. Let's see. So I don't think the fundamentals of how you go about answering the questions that you're curious about change, whether it's in a lab or whether it's in a business setting. So,
and you are in a very unique seat as CEO, having taken the reins from one of our past guests on the show, the founding CEO of Coya, Howard Berman. And his story is very, very personal. It touches on some very real lived experience with his dad. And I'm wondering, how has that been, that handoff of that baton in leadership to lead this company. How has that been for you?
It's been exceptionally smooth, but because of Howard. Howard's passion is obvious to anybody who talks to Howard. He's extremely passionate about this company, about the cause. I think you're aware of the personal story he has with his dad that he has publicly shared. That DNA of passion and commitment is part of Coya's culture. So Howard has done a great job of, making sure that the Coya DNA is hardwired, where that passion is passed on. So I continue his passion. Obviously, I am a different person. I don't necessarily communicate the passion always in the same way, but we're all equally passionate about this cause. And the important part here is that Howard has set the template for the company of being very clear in his vision. What we all want to do, our dream at Coya, is to make Howard's passion translate to something superbly meaningful for patients. And what can that mean? That could mean, for example, patients with ALS being able to lead a normal life. That would be that means that the passion ended up making a difference for patients, and we are all fully in on it. So we are passionate, and I won't speak about the other folks at Coya, but we have several Coya employees who are personally equally passionate because they have personal stories similar to, including affecting themselves. So the passion is part of us. We hire people with that wiring as well, wiring that the patient's at the center of everything we do. So, Howard's energy, Howard's still our chair, so he's very much involved. His energy still comes through. And all I have to do is talk to Howard for 10 minutes, and I get re-energized. And that's his personality as well. So the short answer is, Howard's DNA is a big part of Coya. So we stay committed to that.
And passion is a beautiful thing. It's beautiful. And in my observation of both clients and guests like yourself, it's not always the thing that can sustain. There's a low rumble of the passion that's always there, as you said, in the DNA. Day to day, what are the elements of the Coya culture that you're now developing that sort of rides on the wave of that passion?
Yes, I think you hit it on the head. Passion is the seed, right? Passion is the seed without which new ideas don't grow. But for it to grow, there's more than passion needed. You have to know what you're going to do. How are you going to nurture this passion to bloom, to become, come to life and make a difference? And that requires structure. That requires operational excellence. We got to be able to execute, have a strategy, and be adaptive. In our world, we have to be able to adapt, learn continuously, because we're continuously getting data. We're continuously getting feedback, not just from experiments we do or clinical trials we do, but from what other people are doing in the industry, what regulations are changing, and to be able to adapt and understand and be focused on achieving that objective, right? So that is what I'm now focused on, is to get where we have entered a different phase of Coya. We're entering a more operational, executional phase where it is important that passion, we keep that passion at our core, but we can't forget that if we don't execute on our clinical trials, that passion doesn't necessarily translate to a meaningful difference. So how do you channel all of this passion, put structure around it without becoming bureaucratic, which we completely don't want to do. And that's kind of where a lot of my focus is. And I've done a lot of operational roles, done a lot of roles executing, and that kind of complements well with what, the energy Howard brings as well. So that's kind of where we're focused right now. So
as you think about the stages of Coya, and you think about building your team, what is, you mentioned curiosity being a characteristic. At this stage of Coya, given all those factors, operational excellence, strategic minded, and passionate, what is the avatar, so to speak, of the person that you need to take Coya to even the next level?
I think the prototype or avatar for Coya right now is someone who is, one, committed to making a difference. Two, is willing to do what it takes to do that. This biotech world is not for the light-hearted. There'll be ups and downs, people who are resilient, people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and get it done, no matter what the barriers come our way. Optimistic, but we want people who are optimistic, obviously, but also reasonable people. You got to be practical as well at the same time, and kind of see what is it to solve. I'm looking for problem solvers, not for people who can point to me what the problems are. Right? Coya is not at a stage where we need people who look at a plan and say, "Here's the 100 holes in the plan." We need people with the wiring that say, "Here's a plan. Here's how I can make this plan happen, and here's what we need to do to make it happen." That's it. It may sound subtle, but it is a significant prototype of people that have that kind of a personality type that says, "Let me solve this, and we'll figure it out, right? And let's move forward." Yeah.
Yeah. Shifting gears, just to name the show, Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. Arun, when you hear me say the name of the show, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear me say that?
When you say
Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having, or maybe aren't having enough of.
Yeah, and when you say that, the first thing that comes to my mind is there's actually a lot of conversations life science leaders are not having. I can think of one. I think, look, competition is the key to innovation. So we have to be competitive. Our company wants to do better than the next company. And I think that should never be taken away, because that's what drives innovation. As human beings, we are competitive. And I do truly believe that innovations happen because people are competitive. But that doesn't mean we can also not be collaborative. And I think the conversations in the industry that are not really happening, myself included, guilty as charged, is that I don't believe we're having serious conversations. A lot of them talk about it, that says, how can we be competitors? And that's fine, because we want to be competitors, but still be able to figure out a way to collaborate so we make it easier for all of us that are trying to do something impossible most of the times to make it possible. If there are standard barriers that we're all facing across the industry, I think we should have candid conversations and help each other out. Now, I don't have a solution. Otherwise, I would already propose it. But I do think that that's a conversation that if you talk to 100 CEOs, they'll probably all say we should have this. But I don't know, maybe I should be the one. But somebody's got to kind of, I think, drive it and make it happen without, and I just want to be clear there that, when I say those conversations need to happen, I'm not talking about an altruistic conversation where we all share everything and are not competitive. We have to keep some things to ourselves. We want to keep our competitive edge, but that doesn't mean that we can't have those deeper conversations about, is there better ways to get the regulatory path, better ways we can learn from each other on how we design clinical trials, how we go after the patients we are segmenting. Are there learnings from each other's studies that we can share without without crossing that line where we are giving away our trade secrets, right? And I think the short answer is there's a lot of room for us to have those conversations better. We're probably having 2% of those conversations. If we even move those conversations to 25%, I think it'll make a significant impact for patients.
That's a very forward-thinking idea, and in the midst of a very demanding world of your own at Coya or whatever the company is, how do you prioritize that type of conversation with a peer CEO in the midst of demands, pressures, commitments just within your own walls?
Yeah. And that is the challenge, Jeff. I think prioritizing that and getting to that point is not always going to be easy. But I do think that the way to do that is to prioritize what it is the company is trying to achieve. And all companies, I'm pretty sure pretty much every biotech company is trying to achieve faster way to get safe and effective drugs to patients. So I think we're all aligned on that. So the key is to find those common grounds with the fellow CEOs, with the fellow biotech community on those pain points, on those ideas that could accelerate all of us and can benefit. No two parties come to the table unless they're both going to benefit. So we have to be candid and understanding of how human nature works. But it is about spending some time. And I think it is absolutely worth the CEO's time to spend 10% of her time thinking about this problem. I don't think about it 10% of the time. I'm going to be candid. So, the challenge to myself is let's start thinking about it 10% of time. Let me carve out 10% of my walking time or gym time to start thinking about some of these things on what are those common threads. I do follow what other companies are doing. I do follow what's happening in the industry. It's just I haven't systematically said, look, there's a common theme here. And then reach out to some of those people and say, look, can we together solve this common problem, which is not a competitive issue. It's going to help. It's like building a better highway for everybody. Yes, you can still build a better car, but let's at least build a better highway so we all have the ability to push our cars to be even better. Right. So, and I think if we take that approach, people will come together. It's going to require, somebody reaching out like everything else, and if we're all waiting for somebody else to do it, it's going to take time. So
the highway, take us into one aspect of the highway that is, that you experience a challenge around, a pain point, you observe others. What's one aspect of that highway that most especially needs that cross-company, cross-CEO collaboration?
I mean, in biotech, the highway includes things like patient recruitment, right? I mean, I think people are getting more efficient in patient recruitment, and in some diseases like ALS, it becomes easier because of the high unmet need. But, I think there is ways to collaborate without competing. And how do we make sure we get access and education to the patients? What patients need to understand to participate in a clinical trial is universal. Whether it is Coya's study or company Y's study, those things don't change. Is that something we can do collaboratively to make sure that overall we increase the pool of patients that are willing to participate in a clinical trial? And there's probably ways to do that as a group. And by the way, there are groups that try all of this. So I don't want to say none of this is happening. That's one point, right? I'll take a completely different highway. Small public companies, and this has nothing to do with science. Just being a public company comes with a lot of pressures and pain points and reporting requirements, and that can get pretty time consuming. Are there ways that public companies, small CEOs of public companies that are, of smaller caps can find ways to do something that, learn from each other, that creates a more efficient pathway. That doesn't compete with each other. We're just making it easier for everybody. So everybody can spend 5% less of their time on some of the things they do. So I'm giving you two kind of extreme examples from a patient recruitment to just running a public company. I think there are things one can do. And that doesn't even have to be industry specific. We could probably talk to CEOs of tech company that has similar challenges and learn and see how we can navigate, stuff like that. I think that's just some of the examples, but I can go on. I could probably go on with more.
So take us into the virtual hallways of Coya. What are the conversations that you would love your team to be having more of that they're not maybe necessarily, at least to your knowledge, having today?
Yeah, so I mean, our team is extremely talented team. It's a group of people that have accomplished a lot and are highly passionate, as we talked about before. What I think all of us can benefit from is having more of those hallway conversations that are about solving the problems that are more than just what is in front of us. I think everybody is good at solving problems that are in front of us. Otherwise, we are not in a company like this. I mean, I think by definition, that self-selection has already happened in people that join companies like Coya. The next step is how do we get and create a culture where people are stepping back or stepping up and looking at problems from different angles and trying to solve problems that may not necessarily be in their lane. How do people get comfortable out of their lane? Because sometimes best perspectives come from people who are not in the lane, who are actually outside the lane and are looking at it. And because we all get caught up with our everyday works, I think I would like to see more of that happen. And what can next question could be, what am I going to do to enable it? And I think, yes, that's something that I think a lot about. And we focus a lot at Coya on creating a culture that allows those open conversations first. The first rule for those to happen, for those conversations to happen, is that I have to create an environment where nobody is feeling funny about bringing up ideas that, they may not be sure if it is a good one or not, that there is no repercussions for it, right? That is a culture, and that's a cultural thing. And I take ownership and I'm of creating that. But I think that's what I'd like to see us do more of. And I believe we have the people and the talent to do that. So
what strikes me is what you're talking about is psychological safety, is that folks are willing and feel safe in making a comment or sharing an idea that's outside their lane of expertise. In your career experience, what are the characteristics that facilitate that level of psychological safety? You pointed to you, the leader, the senior leader, setting a tone. What are the other elements that you've observed have been key to creating that level of safety?
Yeah, I think the most important one is what we just talked about. The leader sets that tone. I've been in organizations and different groups with all types of leaders, and I found that the leadership matters in that tone. Extremely important, because if it is just being said but not being followed through, people will revert back to being cautious. I think the key is to do it through examples, meaning you have to live it. And sometimes, and this is going to sound strange that I'm saying it, sometimes you have to enable it by actually calling someone ahead of a few meetings and saying, today, I want you to speak up on this topic. Don't feel that you're not a finance person, but I heard you say something last week about something on finance. Why don't you bring that up at the meeting today? And then when they bring it up, be supportive and make sure that if there are people within the organization that are saying, hey, this is not your place, this is finance, that you step in and say, no, it's about a good idea or not. It's not about what hat I'm wearing. I'm capable of giving you a good idea. I may not play baseball, but I may be able to look at the player and say, hey, he's kind of tilting too much to the right? And that doesn't mean you dismiss me saying I'm not a baseball coach. You listen to me and you say, no, the reason that he's not tilting too much to the right and it's okay is because X, Y, and Z. That's the conversation, right? Always tell me why that person is what they're saying doesn't make sense or makes sense with proper arguments, not by dismissing someone because they did not qualify. That should never be allowed as an answer to any question is you're not qualified to make this comment or you're not answered. No. If you are qualified, then you should have the comfort to answer anybody's question, including a child's, who can sometimes ask the toughest questions, and be able to answer that question. I mean, you don't have to agree, but you have to remove from the culture anybody who tries to win an argument by saying, trust me, this is my expertise, right? And of course, we got to trust the experts. At the end, somebody's got to make a call. But the first response cannot be, hey, I am the quarterback. Don't tell me how to throw the ball. No, I may just be a spectator, but I may see something that I think you can do better and answer the question by saying why what I said makes sense or doesn't make sense, right? So, and that culture doesn't happen overnight. I think you've got to create that environment. And then once people start feeling that, hey, look, I'm not going to get penalized for bringing up something that was outside my lane, people start saying more. And then there's a flip side of it as well, Jeff, which you have to manage, which is you don't want that to become derailing either, where that everybody starts bringing up 100 things at everybody. There's got to be some, but that balance naturally happens. I'll use a completely different example from one of my previous companies. I recall at one point that company introduced these things called the Friday summer hours. And I won't name the company just to be cautious. And first few Fridays of the summer, nobody left work. And the point was you get out at 1:00 in the afternoon, do other things other than work. So, you have a good balance. Nobody did. And then people only left when they finally started seeing their leaders visibly leave, where they came and said, hey, I'm going because I'm going to go shopping, or I'm going because I'm going to do Y. And then the culture took effect, and it actually, I think, made the company more productive, in my personal opinion. But again, things like that sometimes take the leaders to be able to demonstrate that they're actually mean what they say, and that they're not just saying it to be sound. Yeah, I think that's the key.
The phrase that I'm thinking of as you're talking is leader goes first. And so there's so many places that I've heard, culture is grassroots. And yeah, there's elements of grassroots. But at the end of the day, what I hear you describing is culture is top down.
I do believe that. I know that may or may not be something everybody agrees with. I think the person with the single most ability to change culture are the people at the top. Grassroots cultural change is possible. But I think what is important is for a culture to be maintained, the grassroots has to be engaged, has to buy in. Culture top down will not work if the grassroots are not taking root, essentially, right? But I think a leader can change the tone of an organization because they have the ability to give people permission to change, and then I think, so it's a two-way street. But I do think that to make a change in culture, the most efficient way is for it to come from the top.
So good. Arun, we're coming to the end of our conversation. What would you love to highlight about Coya and what's happening right now?
Lots happening at Coya. We are super energized that, we're advancing our therapies for patients with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. We intend to start a clinical trial, a phase 2b trial later this year, assuming that once we submit our package to the FDA, we get the green light. So that is our number one priority at Coya right now, is how do we get this therapy moving in patients with ALS, with the hope that the data plays out well, and then we eventually have a transformational therapy for patients. We are also focused on frontotemporal dementia, related type disease, and we will submit that to the FDA to initiate a clinical trial later in this year as well. In parallel, we're pursuing business development opportunities, partnership opportunities to advance our assets in combination with other modalities in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other autoimmune type diseases as well. So we have a ton going on that makes me very proud of what we're doing. And at the end of it, it is about getting these therapies to patients. And 2025 is a good year in the sense that we're going to make meaningful advances on this front. So,
And do you have a vision for when 2025 is going to be huge, as you said, your 2B clinical trial? What is the dream for patient access in the marketplace?
Yeah, our dream would be that we complete the trial in 2026, the top line data, and then the top line data looks great. And then the regulatory bodies, the FDA and others view it positively and allow us a path to maybe commercialize it as early as 2027. That would be the dream. And that dream would also coincide with the big dream that Coya has, which is, as I said in the beginning of our conversation, if we can allow patients with diseases like ALS to just lead a normal life, I'm not even looking at curing ALS, if they can just not get worse, and if they can continue to lead their lives, I mean, that for us would be, the most satisfying thing we have done. If we can even be a small part of that kind of impact on patients, then the whole reason for Coya's existence becomes meaningful, right? So that's our dream. And I know that our dream is that there's actually a drug that works well for our ALS patients, that is approved and is on the market, and helping these patients and helping Coya grow simultaneously, and rewarding our shareholders and others that stayed and believed in our story as well. That, people are always afraid of saying that, but that's an important element of innovation, as people who supported you need to get rewarded as well for having been supporters of the story. So.
And if folks want to follow Coya more closely or know more about anything we've talked about, where can we send them?
Well, of course, our website, coyatherapeutics.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, on X, I think we're on Instagram. So you can follow us on social media. Of course, they should follow you, Jeff, because hopefully we'll see more Coya stories through you.
Yes.
So yeah, I'd say, the usual social channels, websites. If you have access, of course, to analyst reports and other SEC type documents which we file, you can obviously follow our story there as well. And we are a very accessible leadership team. So if there are people that have questions about Coya, I myself personally, people like Howard, our chief medical officer, chief financial officer, everybody at Coya will be more than happy to try and find the time, talk to people who are wanting to learn more about our company and what we're trying to achieve. So,
well, we'll put all those links in the show notes. Arun, this has been just a cornucopia. There's so many aspects of your journey and of what you're up to. So really want to express my gratitude on behalf of the audience for all that you've brought today.
No, Jeff, I really appreciate time with you. love the passion you bring to your job, and also I know that you've publicly stated it, so I will say it in this meeting. Good luck with your efforts. I know you're pushing hard. I'm amazed and admire at what you're trying to do. I look forward to seeing those pictures from the top of Kilimanjaro. So really, really admire what you're doing, Jeff. That's what it's all about. So.
Thank you, my friend.